So today we're diving into one of the most profound and honestly one of the most quietly painful human experiences there is, the end of a love story. But we're not talking about some big dramatic breakup. We're going to look at it through this fascinating new lens from neuroscience to understand how something that feels so real can just, well, end.
You know, it's the kind of question that can really stick with you for years. How can a connection that feels so stable, so fundamental to who you are, just dissolve without some big, dramatic explosion? What's actually happening in our minds and hearts when a future you thought was certain suddenly becomes impossible? All right, to really get our heads around this, we're going to look at a case study. It's this beautiful, kind of melancholic short film called Shideh, and it just perfectly captures the exact kind of quiet, painful goodbye that we're here to understand today. The film kicks off with this line, and it just feels so normal, right? It's this casual intimacy. The dialogue suggests a routine, a connection that feels totally stable and predictable. There's really no hint of a storm on the horizon.
And then, this. A simple statement of fact that just lands without any malice, but it changes everything. It's not a confession of betrayal, you see. It's the introduction of an irreversible boundary, a future that simply cannot be shared. This is the core tension.
Now, this is what's so interesting. The motivation here, the return isn't about trying to rekindle things or to have a big fight. No, it's about preserving the integrity of what they had. It's about making sure the ending is clean, respectful, and fully understood. So how on earth do we make sense of this? Well, we're going to use this really powerful tool called the Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM for short. It gives us a completely new language to talk about love, not just as a feeling, but as a stable system in the brain. So the BKM reframes love as what it calls a coherence basin. Now, I want you to think of it like a deep, calm valley, or maybe a really stable weather pattern. It's this global state in the brain where everything, your memories, your emotions, your sense of self, is all connected and ordered. And crucially, it's sustained by its own positive energy, not by the drama of constantly solving problems. And this helps explain why that feeling of love is just so powerful, right? It's low turbulence, it feels calm and safe. A single memory can bring you right back into that state. It connects pretty much everything in your life, and it just persists, kind of humming in the background without needing constant attention. Okay, so here is the absolute key point. The BKM model says there are two kinds of fuel or strain for a system. You've got negative strain, that's the drama, the conflict, the uncertainty, the threat. But stable love, that runs on positive strain. It runs on the internal feelings of safety, of meaning, and of simply valuing the other person. It literally generates its own energy. The model gives us three dials that control this system. Think of R as the active energy in the relationship, kind of like the fuel in the tank. Theta is the synchrony, how in step you feel with each other. And I is how much of your own identity is tied to the relationship. So in Shideh, the energy, R, is fading, but their emotional synchrony, Theta, is still incredibly high, even as they're trying to carefully renegotiate and separate their identity. All right, so now that we have this framework, we can go back and decode exactly what's happening in that quiet, heartbreaking conversation in the film. Most breakups we see are what you'd call turbulent collapses. They're full of emotional chaos, a real fracturing of your identity. But what Shideh shows us is something else entirely, a graceful termination. Here, the coherence is actually sustained. There's no shock, just the calm recognition of a new boundary. The goal is to preserve identity, not to shatter it. And here is the precise diagnosis from the BKM model. The problem isn't a lack of love in the present moment. Not at all. It's what they call a longitudinal future mismatch. Basically, their life paths have diverged so much that a shared future is just no longer physically possible. The love is still coherent, but it's lost its path forward. So you see, the emotional journey here isn't like falling off a cliff. It's a soft terminal slope. They're on what you could call a descending plateau. They're maintaining intimacy and coherence while gently and in a controlled way letting the energy of the system drain away. And that's exactly why the film feels so melancholic instead of just tragic. And this is the most profound conclusion from this whole analysis. The coherence basin of their love doesn't just vanish or prove to have been fake, it simply becomes unreachable. The memory, the state itself, it all remains real and valid even if they can no longer live inside of it. But what's really incredible about this model is that it doesn't just apply to romantic love between two people. No way. This whole idea of a coherence basin can actually be scaled up to understand how entire groups of people connect. So
At a collective level, love becomes a population-level basin. I mean, think about the aftermath of a natural disaster, where complete strangers suddenly start helping each other. Individual identity boundaries just soften, and the group is sustained by a shared positive strain, this mutual desire to help and protect each other.
A shared crisis like that acts as a giant phase reset button. It makes everyone's individual problems seem way less important, and it synchronizes their attention and their emotional state. It creates this temporary but incredibly powerful sense of we.
But, this can go in a few different directions. With high synchrony and a flexible sense of identity, you get healthy solidarity. But if you have extreme identity coupling, it can become this pathological, almost cult-like fusion. And with low synchrony, well, that's just fear-based panic. So love scales, but only when identity is still respected.
Okay, let's bring all of this back home, back to our central theme. This model offers such a powerful lesson about what it really means to find a healthy, meaningful ending. This right here is the single most important takeaway. It's a framework for closure that doesn't require you to invalidate your past. The love was real, the connection was real. The fact that you can no longer access it doesn't change its reality one bit. So what does this clean closure actually get you? Well, according to the model, it leaves you without that leftover guilt or emotional chaos. Your sense of self stays intact, and crucially, the memory of the love is preserved as a positive, completed experience, not some wound that reopens every single time you think about it. So I'll just leave you with this one final thought. What if we completely reframe our idea of an ending? What if it's not a failure, or a collapse, or some big mistake, but it's simply the completion of a beautiful, coherent shape in time, something that was real and whole and is now simply complete?